Well, I will accept the results of our upcoming discussions, as long as I win. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, the final presidential debate is in the books. Wisconsin's U.S. Senate candidates also debate and their air war intensifies. The Packers lose to the Cowboys but bounce back to beat the Bears at Lambeau. The Milwaukee police officer involved in the shooting of Sylville Smith is arrested for sexual assault. State Attorney General says he's looking into the undercover video where a prominent Democratic activist appears to brag about voter fraud, and a Madison man pleads guilty to trying to join ISIS. But we start with another controversial comment from our controversial sheriff. Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark Jr. sparked national reaction last week when he sent out this tweet. It is incredible that our institutions of government, to the White House, Congress, DOJ, and big media are corrupt, and all we do is bitch. Pitchforks and torches time. He followed that up with a similar message. The federal government has lost its healthy fear of the masses and we the people. It is pitchfork and torches time in America. Well, the reference to pitchforks and torches raised eyebrows because Clark is, of course, a law enforcement officer. An editorial in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel accused Sheriff Clark of using a violent image. Quote, Clark's continued heated rhetoric on gun rights only feeds that violent imagery. The last thing this country needs is a demagogue stirring up the passions of fools who may take him at his word. Remember, Timothy McVeigh and his slaughter of 168 innocents in federal government offices in Oklahoma City. That act of terrorism was also conducted in the name of quote-unquote justice against a supposedly corrupt federal government. For his part, Clark is not backing down, defending the term in a blog post and repeating it at a rally for Republican Donald Trump in Green Bay last Monday night.
Like I said, and I'll continue to say, it is pitchfork and torches time in America.
On our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, former State Representative Michelle Litchens, Defense Attorney Dan Adams, and Media Tracker's Brian Sikma. Was it violent imagery? Your reaction to that, Dan Adams?
Oh, undeniably it was violent imagery, and it's really disappointing. You know, you have a guy who has made his name attacking, left-wing, Black Lives Matters type protests as anarchists who want to be outside of the system, who want to use violence, not votes, for their political ends. And then, as a perfect hypocrite, he comes out and puts this out.
Okay, what do you actually think that he was talking about? Was he talking about violence? Was he talking about violence?
Yes,
really?
There is a trend in the populist right wing, not conservatism, populist right wing that has attached themselves to this idea of Second Amendment remedies. That if you can't win at the ballot box, you are legitimized by picking up arms.
So were you horrified when Bernie Sanders on a daily basis called for a revolution?
No, a revolution at the ballot box. That's one thing, but there's another thing to say pitchforks, clubs, torches.
Okay. Well, we have to look at this in
context.
You're
a rabble-rouser. What is he talking about?
What is Sheriff Clark talking about? Well, you have to look at this in the context of Sheriff David Clark's career. I mean, this is one of the people that's been out there at the forefront, condemning violence against police officers, upholding the rule of law. I think it'd be wise if the Journal-Sentinel editors got off their high horse and realized that it's not inflammatory rhetoric about the Second Amendment, it's actually constitutional rhetoric. The words and the verbiage were probably ill-advised, but the fact of the matter is he's talking about, we're 2.5 weeks out from an election right now. He's talking about people going to the ballot box, making their opinions and views known. There's no other way to construe this. Even Sheriff Clark came out and clarified that's what he meant by this. So was the best verbiage to use? Probably not, and certainly not given all this controversy. But it was certainly metaphorical, and there's been candidates on both sides of the aisle that have used this.
I think the truth is somewhere between the two of you. And actually, you all missed it.
Okay.
What the sheriff was talking about was actually doing was an interview for his television show following the election. He's rousing up an audience that's going to follow him after Donald Trump is trumped. Prepare for the worst.
Okay.
I think talking about violent imagery, you're right, Dan, with that, but he did not say go out and commit violence. He did not say let's bring your assault rifles and kill people and take hostages.
No.
He did, and he's talking, especially that Trump audience. Those folks are angry, and so I think the imagery that he talked about really was very symbolic for how a lot of people feel.
Is it, I'll play devil's advocate, is it dangerous, given the fact that things are angry, is that kind of rhetoric perhaps possible that would be misinterpreted, would lead to inappropriate behavior?
No, I really don't believe so at all, because really, I mean, the pitchfork and the torch. You're not.
Okay, when's the last time we ever saw pitchforks and torches? In a Frankenstein movie, right? Or in The Simpsons.
But the rest of his rhetoric has to do with arming yourselves with firearms. So you transfer that firearm glorification with this, and you have a recipe.
And it's not about defense. I mean, let's be honest. You know, these crazy Trump knights, or whatever you want to call them, are not talking about defense. They are talking about taking some kind of action to bring back America. The America when torches to us came on a cross.
All right, I think this is one of those moments where everybody needs to take a really deep breath here, because there was clearly a metaphorical comment. Yes, given how tense things are, we ought to be careful about it. But you know, when you use language like, you know, David Clark is a bomb thrower, am I accusing him of throwing bombs? These are rhetorical things, you know. And is there any evidence in David Clark's life that he, in fact, has ever incited anyone to commit an illegal or violent act?
I don't think he means it literally.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Literally, but I'm just saying, how do those people take it?
They take it the same way I think he meant it. That is, going out to the ballot box and acting change. And I disagree with the candidate that he's campaigning for right now, Donald Trump. But certainly this was a reference to the electoral process. This is something Democrats, Republicans have both done. And I think it's time for the media to take a step back from the hyperventilating this election cycle and look at the facts and what's being said.
Michael Holt actually made an interesting point here, that he says that this is about branding. This is about what is Sheriff David Clark's ambition here? What is his trajectory? Because it is interesting. He has become, let's just say that he's become very, very active on the national scene as a spokesman for Donald Trump, very, very active on all of this. So you think that he is setting himself up to be what?
To get a national stage.
Yeah. Well,
he's going to get a television program somewhere.
Is he running for re-election in 2018?
Well, if he has
short
the
answer,
only person if he has to worry about is John Seifert, then
no. Sheriff David Clark is checked out of his day job, and number two, he's not coming back to run the Democratic primary in 2018. I called that here. What is your glass half full? What is your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you are first.
Well, my glass is half full because the county's energy assistance program is a godsend for thousands of low-income families. My glass is half empty because, for whatever reason, the program has been providing grants to only 1/3 of the 175,000 eligible families.
Michelle Hitchens.
Well, my glass is half full because Archbishop Timothy Dolan asked Hillary Clinton for an apology for the anti-Catholic comments made by her staff that were revealed in WikiLeaks. It is half empty because Hillary will never apologize for making fun of Catholics. She'd only apologize for making fun of Muslims or Jews.
Dan Adams.
My glass is half full because this presidential election is thankfully almost over. My glass is half empty because the divisiveness and hostility and the attacks on many American institutions, and really our core faith in the basic goodness of our country, will be hard to repair. The United States isn't perfect, but my God, we've done more positive things here than any other country, ever. Let's come together in 16 days and fight for our future.
Brian Sigma.
Well, my glass is half full because this week Iraqi and Kurdish forces backed by U.S. forces began the fight to retake Mosul, the Islamic State's largest remaining stronghold in Iraq. My glass is half empty because at least one American soldier has died in the fighting so far.
Well, my glass is half empty because it's Sunday and there's no Packer game to take our mind off the campaign. It's half full because the Packers did beat the Bears last Thursday night, and the glow from that should be more than enough to get us through the weekend. Our Sunday Insight Countdown shows we are just 16 days away from the presidential election. And either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump will take the oath of office in 89 days. And as we go to the break, some much-needed humor from the candidates from Thursday night's Al Smith dinner.
This is such a special event that I took a break from my rigorous nap schedule to be here. And as you've already heard, it's a treat for all of you too, because usually I charge a lot for speeches like this.
One of the things I noticed tonight, and I've known Hillary for a long time, is this is the first time ever, that Hillary is sitting down and speaking to major corporate leaders and not getting paid for it. It's true. It's true.
Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton debated for the third and final time, thank goodness. And Senator Ron Johnson faced off with former Senator Russ Feingold, and both candidates have intensified their air war, which you know if you watch TV.
My opponent backs bad trade deals that export jobs.
Thank you, Russ Feingold, for nothing.
So let's talk about the state of this race, Brian Sykes, going into the last 2 weeks.
Well, it certainly seems like this race has gotten a whole lot tighter than a lot of people anticipated, including from Senator Russ Feingold, who thought this was going to be a pretty easy cakewalk to get that old seat back. The polling shows it's tightening, whether it's the poll coming out of Marquette University. Of course, the campaigns are indicating to their own respective supporters that it's getting tight. So this is something that really is going to be interesting.
What do you say?
You know, there was a Monmouth poll that came out. Feingold ahead 8 points. There's another PPP, which is Democratic poll, 6 points. So I think it's a little too late. Too late for Senator Johnson.
Well, Senator Johnson, though, did make a pivot and started hammering on Obamacare. Is that going to make any difference? Is that going to move? And is it possible, we talked about this before, that now that it looks like Hillary Clinton's going to win this election, that there will be ticket splitting?
There's a good possibility. Wisconsin does have a history of ticket splitting,
right.
So we might see that. And again, I still think looking at the outstate of Wisconsin, which historically does not turn out in as large numbers as they do down in southeastern Wisconsin in presidential races, if they are still so angry and motivated to turn out for Donald Trump, there's a really good possibility they're going to turn out and support Ron Johnson, too.
You know, the interesting thing to come out of some of the latest polls is that Feingold's negatives have gone up, but his favorables have remained the same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could say he's closing, you know, Johnson's closing the gap a little bit in that respect, but people still don't know Johnson. 30% of the people still don't know Johnson.
That's the one thing that is changing, and I think that he's got that ad where he's changing the baby's diaper, which humanizes him. I think, you know, the ads on the Joffice Project do that. But, you know, part of the problem is the nature of the electorate. There has not been a Republican who has won a Senate race in a presidential election year since 1980, when Bob Caston won during the first Reagan landslide. And number two, you just wonder what the undertow of Donald Trump is going to be, because, you know, after last week's debate, I just don't sense a lot of momentum for Donald Trump in Wisconsin.
Just to add to that, and to your point, Michael, Feingold hasn't been above 50% ever, right? So you know those other people who are still sitting out there waiting, who might not really be familiar with Ron Johnson, if he is on the radio and on the TV enough in the next 2 weeks, they might decide they're going to break for him because they obviously have not chosen Feingold.
Yeah. I just remember all the other presidential elections that we've had. We've been doing this show for most of them. I cannot remember the last time we were this close to a presidential election where there seems so little enthusiasm or excitement.
Yeah.
You may not want to hear it, but we'll tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you are first.
Well, to Donald Trump, in light of your insulting remarks at the Al Smith dinner and other remarks in the last month, you know, Donald, most pharmacies carry something for your case of severe verbal diarrhea. Maybe you should try it.
Michelle Litchens.
Well, to Attorney General Brad Schimmel, we don't mind when you keep information about political investigations close to your vest, but please let us know you're going to investigate the voter fraud videos to the fullest extent you can so that we don't lose faith in our free election system.
Dan Adams.
This week, 2 carrying concealed weapon permit holders were charged for unlawfully shooting people in Milwaukee. My advice, just because you have a CCW, don't act like Dirty Harry. But if you do, you'll need to a really good defense lawyer.
Wow. Well,
No shame. Brian Sigma.
My unsolicited advice is for Assembly Democrats. One candidate you recruited this year is suing taxpayers for $1 million. Another candidate bizarrely claims that a radio ad about her record makes children cry. And yet a third Democratic candidate heavily uses profanities to attack Governor Scott Walker. Next election cycle, try recruiting some serious candidates.
Well, my advice to voters, even if you plan to vote for Hillary Clinton, think long and hard about whether you want her to also have a Congress that will rubber stamp all of her policies. Next on Sunday Insight, just how well are students performing in our schools? New test scores raise questions about how well Wisconsin students are actually doing. Less than half of Wisconsin's public school students are now performing at grade level, according to the new data set released by the Department of Public Instruction. Statewide, 42.5% of students were proficient in English on the so-called forward exam. In math, 42.3% of students were proficient. Meanwhile, a report says that Wisconsin has the worst racial graduation rate gap in the country. So, Michael Holt, you know, you have these reports. 60% of students, are not proficient. You have this huge racial graduation rate, and the reaction to it, pretty much crickets.
Well, I was at the paper last week taking over for the editor. So I was getting all the press releases in and all the announcements of press conferences. There was 14 between Monday and Wednesday from all the politicians, and they talking about everything from new job applications to highway construction. Not one held a press conference to talk about this.
Really?
Is it totally off the radar?
Yeah.
Have we become so apathetic?
Yes.
Is the status quo such that we're just saying, screw it? Or is it because these are black kids we're talking about?
Well,
in
except
Milwaukee?
we're not talking about, this is statewide you're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about the graduation rate
exactly.
in Milwaukee. Let's focus on Milwaukee.
Okay, well, I've gotten used to the fact that nobody in Milwaukee has any sense of outrage about what's going on in Milwaukee. But statewide, have we decided that that's acceptable, Michelle Litchens?
Definitely not statewide. Milwaukee is so much worse, though, that I think it brings down the rest of the state. When only 20% of the students in Milwaukee are proficient in English and 15% are proficient in math, that means much more of the outstate is much
But
more
isn't that the attitude, though, that the people outstate just simply assume that the problem is Milwaukee, when in fact maybe they ought to be looking in the mirror?
And that's an excellent point, too, because most people think all of their schools are great. So thank goodness,
we're all above average.
That the Republicans have taken control. You can find this report online. You can look at how your school district is doing.
Well, Troy, what I think is, to Michael's point, what's very disturbing is the fact that we have, over 80% of kids in MPS are not proficient in math and reading and science.
Stunning.
You have over 50% of kids statewide in this same problem, and yet the Department of Public Instruction wants to come out and declare that MPS is not a failing school district, that they're doing everything just okay. It's like they're returning some sort of bizarre separate but equal standard.
Let's also take into consideration that when you talk about the 80% failing, it is not a coincidence that 80% of the kids in MPS are also poor.
Yeah.
And nobody cares about that either. I mean, you can't deal with one without
well, but also, I mean,
we got dysfunctional families.
Brian's point, though, is that the response to this is simply to basically dumb down the standards, change the report card, and then, of course, we have the national NAACP comes out in favor of a moratorium on all charter schools.
And I just wrote about that last week.
What'd you say about it?
And I said that they were under the thumb of the teachers union, because there's no rational reason under God's green earth, because they've never come up with an alternative to sending the kids. They don't send their kids to these failing schools.
Listen, I share the outrage, but there are some silver linings. Listen, 100% of our kids take the ACT test. We are in the middle of the country there. We have the 6th best graduation rate in the country. There are some silver linings, but I agree, especially with black kids, we need to do better.
Way too much complacency. What is it you don't get? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, as we were just talking, what I don't get is, given the abysmal state of education we just discussed, why people can't come together and work together to establish a new city-wide educational paradigm, one that puts children before special interests.
Michelle Litchens.
Charlie, I don't get why Target is removing clown masks from their stores this Halloween.
Dan Adams. Yeah.
Just when I thought the Milwaukee County Board couldn't get goofier, I don't get how the board responded to Sheriff Clark's pitchforks and torches speech with a cutesy tweet. Supervisors, get it together.
Brian Sickma.
Well, what I don't get is how Hillary Clinton can repeatedly hammer Donald Trump, alleging he has ties to Russia, while the mainstream media never asked Clinton about her so-called Russian reset as Secretary of State, which arguably emboldened the Russians to invade and annex Crimea.
Well, what I don't get is why Wisconsin Republicans are sitting by silently while Donald Trump and his supporters attack and vilify their own favorite son, Paul Ryan. Next on Sunday Insight, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It is time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, this week, the line is blurred between winners and losers. Instead, I want to send out a message to my mother, Reverend Sedina Holt, who's facing a very serious health crisis. As my near-death scenario a few years ago proved, collective prayer does work. So we all pray for you, and we love you, Mom.
Michelle Litchens.
The winner this week is Chris Wallace. He asked some very tough questions of both candidates, and he tried to keep them focused better than any other debate moderator this cycle. The loser is the future of the Alfred E. Smith Memorial Dinner. If the next two presidential candidates can't politically poke fun at each other, the Catholic tradition dinner is over.
Dan Adams.
My winner is Hillary Clinton. Over 4.5 hours of debate, she kept her cool, showed discipline and poise, and refused to get in the gutter with Donald Trump, all the while never shrinking under the spotlight. My losers are down-ballot Republicans, those Wisconsin Assembly and State Senate members in particular. Oh, and Senator Ron Johnson, who will soon be casualties of their party's decision to nominate Trump as their standard bearer.
Brian Stigma.
Well, my winner this week is the pro-life cause. The debate exchange on Wednesday night between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton thrust the pro-life topic back into the public eye while showing just how radically out of touch Hillary Clinton is with many Americans' views. Well, my losers of this week are Wisconsin health insurance consumers. A Media Tracker's review of state insurance data has found that health insurance options in Wisconsin's most populous counties have decreased since the start of Obamacare.
Well, my winners this week, I hope, voters, because the election will be over in just 16 days. We hope. Thanks for joining us and joining us for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.